Hi, I'm Sativa, and today I will be discussing the nervous system, including all the structures that we need to know and their functions. So, firstly, the nervous system function is for rapid communication. So, the first structures we need to know is the lobes of the brain. So, here would be considered the front of the brain. Here is the back of the brain, and this all right here is the cerebrum, which is the biggest part of the brain. So here is the frontal lobe, which helps with motor movement. This would be the parietal lobe, which receives sensory information. We have the occipital lobe, which does visual processing. And then this is the temporal lobe on the side of your head, which helps with auditory and balancing. Here would be the cerebral hemispheres. We have the left and right cerebral hemispheres. This would be the longitudinal fissure right here. Also, the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe is separated by the central sulcus, so we can see that right here. This would be the central sulcus on the human brain model. Yeah. Next, we have the ventricles of the brain. So the ventricles' function is to hold and produce cerebral spinal fluid. So first we have the lateral ventricle, which goes to all four lobes of the brain. We have the third ventricle, which is found between the two thalami, so the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Then we have the cerebral aqueduct, which is between the third and the fourth ventricle. Here's the fourth ventricle, which is by the cerebellum. So look at the cerebellum and you could see the fourth ventricle. So on the sheep, we have the sagittal cut, which is this picture right here on the left, and then we have the coronal cut on the right. So in my opinion, it's easier to see all four ventricles on the sagittal cut. You can actually see all four ventricles, rather than on the coronal cut, you can only see two of them. So here is the lateral ventricle. You can see that it goes to all four lobes of the brain. You hear? We have the third ventricle, which is right here. We have the cerebral aqueduct, which would be between the third and the fourth ventricle. And then looking at the cerebellum, we see the fourth ventricle right here. And then on the coronal cut, we can only see the lateral ventricle and the third ventricle, which would be right here by the two thalami. So here are the blood vessels of the brain. So the blood vessels of the brain, we have the anterior cerebral artery, which anteriors towards the front. So we have the anterior cerebral arteries right here. And then we have the communicating artery right here, which connects them. A little bit down below, we have the middle cerebral arteries. And then down even further, we have the posterior cerebral arteries. And then we have their communicating artery, also known as the posterior communicating artery. Here, this circle would be the circle of Willis. And basically the circle of Willis is a way to bypass any sort of clot that happens in the middle cerebral artery or anything like that. Going down further, we can see the basilar artery here. And further down, we could see the vertebral arteries, which will go through the transverse foramen. And these all supply blood to our brain. Here would be the structures within the brain. So this would be the human brain. So firstly, looking at the cerebellum, which is this structure right here. The cerebellum is responsible for body coordination. So this structure right here that looks like a tree, that would be the arbor vitae. And then now looking at the cerebrum, firstly we have the corpus callosum, which is made out of white matter, and it basically allows us to take or to send information from one part of the brain to the other. A little bit down below we have the choroid plexus, which is responsible for producing cerebral spinal fluid as well. Next we have the thalamus, which is one structure of the diencephalon. The thalamus is responsible for distributing what information goes to which part of the brain. So it's like our organizer of the brain. We have our pineal gland, which is the second part of the diencephalon. Our pineal gland releases melatonin when there's no blue light. So if you're feeling sleepy, your pineal gland releases the melatonin. And then we have our hypothalamus, which is under the thalamus. And this is a very important structure that communicates with or receives information from all our organ systems. It plays a big role in our endocrine system with our hormones, and it controls or is responsible for our autonomic functions. We have the optic chiasm right here. Looking at the brainstem, we have the midbrain, we have pons here, we have the medulla oblongata, and we have the pituitary gland here. And yeah, that would be on the human brain. So now looking at the sheep brain, we can see the dura mater, which is this structure right here. It's what we peeled off before we dissected. We have our sagittal sinus. Our sagittal sinus drains the blood. That would be right here. And then again, looking at the cerebellum, we can see the arbor vitae, this tree-like structure. We see our pineal gland here. We see our thalamus. If we see our thalamus, we can see our hypothalamus. And then we have our pituitary gland here. Looking at the brainstem, we have the midbrain right here. We have our pons, and then pons right here, and then we have our medulla oblongata, and then this right here would be considered the spinal cord. We have our optic chiasm here, our corpus callosum. Again, this would be the lateral ventricle and then the third ventricle, and then we have our choroid plexus. And yeah, I want to say that on the other side of this brain, I didn't get to get a picture of it, but you will be able to see the structures such as the corpora quadrigemina, which is like the four-like structures when you put the two sides of the brain together. So you'll be able to see that. You'll also be able to see the cerebral hemispheres, the right and left, when you put the sheep brain together. and also the longitudinal fissures. I just didn't get I didn't get a picture of it, so I'm sorry, but it's pretty much the same as the human brain. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that this helped maybe point out structures that you didn't know. But yeah, thank you.